Joining me now with the latest is NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung. So, Brian, the markets don't seem to totally be sold on Trump's posts becoming a reality. Take us inside the numbers. What happened out there? Are they taking him seriously or literally or at all?
Yeah, well, look, when you talk about the closing numbers, you can see them on the board ahead of you. The Dow Jones down 0.6%, the S&P 500, the more broad-based index, down 0.7%. And those tech-heavy stocks where that would certainly include a heavier weighting on companies like Apple, down a little bit more by 1%. But this isn't necessarily a Black Monday type of day. It's just simply a day where stocks ended marginally red. So I don't think that it's the markets necessarily freaking out over what's going on with these announcements. But I do think, broadly speaking, there was this concern that, look, we had gotten over most of the crazy tariff headlines about a month ago. And after the 90-day pause, and especially the de-escalation, especially with China, there was maybe some thought within Wall Street that maybe this was going to be a quieter summer. And then here you have the Friday before Memorial Day weekend, the president kicking back up some of these tariff headlines. I do think that has the volatility perhaps coming back marginally to Wall Street. But again, the question here is what he's saying on Truth Social to be taken literally or figuratively. That is kind of the ongoing story with this administration, and that's something that Wall Street's going to have to grapple with as we continue to see these tariff threats going forward, Ryan.
And then another confusing call by the president. He's called on Apple to make iPhones in the U.S. or face a tariff. Is what he's calling for actually realistic? What exactly is he threatening here?
Well, originally in the morning when he posted on Truth Social suggesting that he was not only looking at specifically tariffing Apple, but tariffing a specific product line, the iPhone, there were a lot of questions swirling around over how could the president do that. Yes, they could use the emergency authorities and claim under national security interests that you need to tariff an entire industry, but to take one specific company and then one specific product remained legally ambiguous. Although we did hear from the president in the Oval Office just a few minutes ago where he did clarify that, quote, he didn't want to be unfair to Apple, even though Apple and the iPhone were very clearly the specific target of his Truth Social. But he said that he would expand the scope of this particular tariff to cover essentially all smartphones that are coming into the United States, which would include, and he name-checked the company Samsung, a Korean phone maker that makes a lot of popular Android-based products. So it does sound like if he does want to follow through on this 25% tariff, it wouldn't just cover the iPhone, Ryan. It would cover all the smartphones that come into this country, which there are very few of them made entirely domestically here in the United States.
And of course, the key there, will he follow through? Because he's threatened a lot of tariffs and not necessarily many of them have actually manifest themselves. What else did we hear, though, the president say about tariffs today? It seemed to indicate that these companies will have to eat the tariffs?
Yeah, well, look, there was the conversation of whether or not the, president was actually adamant on whether or not these companies should take these costs. There was a conversation that was reported that he had with Walmart suggesting that they should take the price increases themselves. As we know, when it comes to the tariffs, any importing company, which in many cases are the American companies, they're the ones that would have to pay for it. Take a listen to this exchange with regards to his clarification over where he thinks the tariffs should be paid for.
Sometimes the country will eat it, sometimes Walmart will eat it, and sometimes there'll be something to pay, something extra. I don't like it when a department store, because they'll do a lot of business, but, they announce record profits and everything else. They have to take out some of their profits. They'll make a little bit less money. But I don't want the consumer to pay.
I don't want the consumer to pay. But again, if we're kind of taking it to the timely story of today, which is about these smartphones, you have Dan Ives at Wedbush Security saying that an entirely U.S.-made iPhone would cost $3,500. That's a lot more expensive than the $1,200 to $1,300 it costs today. How would the consumer not be able to pay for that? It would have to be Apple. That's a big question whether or not Apple wants to do that, Ryan.
Someone's going to have to pay, right, Brian?
That's right.
I guess we won't know for sure.
No free lunches.
Until it actually is implemented. Brian Chung, thank you as always. Turning now to breaking news, the Trump administration's ongoing battle with Harvard University as the president continues to attempt to use the power of the presidency to target his perceived critics. In a legal blow to the Trump administration, a federal judge in Boston is blocking the White House from revoking Harvard's ability to enroll international students, at least for now. Yesterday, the White House terminated Harvard's student exchange visitor program, aiming to bar the Ivy League university from admitting international students and also forcing current international students to transfer schools or lose their legal status. The judge's ruling came just hours after Harvard filed a lawsuit accusing the administration of, quote, unconstitutional retaliation after the school refused to comply with demands from the White House's task force to combat anti-Semitism. The Department of Homeland Security is demanding that Harvard turn over disciplinary, criminal, and protest records for all students over the last 5 years. Harvard's legal complaint states, quote, with the stroke of a pen, the government has sought to erase a quarter of Harvard's student body, international students who contribute significantly to the university and its mission. Harvard is also suing the Trump administration for halting more than $2 billion in federal research funding last month after the school refused to comply with White House demands to change its hiring and admissions processes. NBC News senior digital White House reporter Shannon Pettypiece joins me now. Also joining me from Harvard is NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton. Shannon, let's start with you. Is there any response from the White House right now to this Boston judge's ruling?
Well, definitely no signs of the White House or the president backing down on this. The president was asked a couple hours ago in the Oval Office by a reporter about this action taken against Harvard that would significantly reduce their enrollment and essentially wipe out all of their foreign student enrollment. You know, the president continued to double down on this position he has taken. He has said that Harvard students, he accused them of doing remedial math. He said they were engaged in anti-Semitic protests. Is what the president is saying. And he said that Harvard was going to have to clean up its act. And he suggested that other universities could be next in the administration's efforts to sort of put pressure on these universities to make the changes that the White House has been asking for them around cracking down on some of these student protests and free speech of their students.
And Shannon, how is the White House responding to this latest lawsuit from Harvard?
Yeah, I mean, the White House put out a statement earlier today. It said in the statement, if only Harvard cared this much about ending the scourge of anti-American, anti-Semitic, pro-Israel, pro-terrorist agitators on their campus, they wouldn't be in this situation to begin with. So, again, coming back to this accusation that the university is the one who's not taking action against what the administration claims of these anti-Semitic, anti-American actions. The administration's also said that this lawsuit by Harvard is an attempt to essentially kneecap the president's constitutional ability to restrict immigration, which is another argument that the White House has been making here.
All right, Shannon, thank you for that. Let's turn now to Antonia, who is on the ground there in Cambridge. What's the reaction been like on Harvard's campus, Antonia?
Shock, exhaustion, fear from the students that I've been speaking to. Look, even though they're relieved that this judge has taken this action, there's this temporary restraining order in place. There's a hearing coming up next week, the day before graduation here. The reality that these students are faced with is that this could wind through the courts for quite a while, and it could mean that their legal status, their ability to focus on their studies, to live their lives here, could become incredibly complicated. You know, scenarios that came up today in my conversations with international students. What happens if I go home and visit my parents and then come back and I'm detained at the U.S. border? Who helps me? Am I going to be stuck in detention somewhere for a while? Is that worth the risk? What happens if I'm here on campus and then lose my status? Will ICE descend on our campus and come get students and try to get them out of the country as quickly as possible if we're in legal limbo at that moment? Take a listen to a conversation I had with a senior named Leo. He's graduating in just a few days.
It's just so horrible. Trump is using us right now as poker chips in a battle between the White House and Harvard. And really, I think it's just dehumanizing that we're being used in this way. We have done nothing to be in this situation. Our only crime is that we study at Harvard. And there are so many dreams that are simply shattered.
A lot of the students that I'm talking to, Ryan, they're particularly concerned about their international classmates who are from countries like Ukraine or Pakistan. And there's real serious concern about what it would mean if they were sent home, if they would be safe, what kinds of resources they might have, aid they'll be looking to get from the school in that scenario. And so this has really caused a fear that I think is unlikely to go away, certainly not by next week when the year ends here on campus, but likely will stick with them through the next year. And imagine if you're actually a freshman or about to be a freshman. So you've already said yes, you turned down other schools, you've made your plans to move here in August, and now you're being told that all of this may be up in the air. That is a pretty frightening scenario if you're just 17 or 18 years old, Ryan.
Yeah, the lack of clarity has got to make lives difficult for so many. Antonia Hilton, thank you for that reporting on the ground in Massachusetts. With me now is Holden Thorp. He is the former chancellor of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, who has warned that the Trump administration's attacks on higher education should be concerning to all Americans. You were the chancellor, sir, of a public university, as opposed to Harvard, which is a private institution. But just give us your reaction to this move by the administration and what it means big picture for higher ed in general.
Well, big picture, the reason that the United States has led the scientific enterprise, which has been good for the U.S. and for the world, is really four things. One, higher investment. The second is strong IP protection. The third is little government interference in research. And the fourth is the ability to attract the best talent from all over the world. Well, all four of those have been weakened significantly. And this latest move shows that the ability to attract talent from all over the world is going to be weakened significantly, because even if Harvard prevails here, the chill that this sends over whether outstanding people are welcome at U.S. universities right now from outside the United States is something that a lot of people are feeling, as your interview just showed.
All right. Listen, if you can, to what Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said yesterday.
This should be a warning to every other university to get your act together. Get your act together, because we are coming to make sure that these programs, that you are facilitating an environment where students can learn, where they're safe, and that they're not discriminated against based on their race or their religion.
I would imagine if you were still in your role as chancellor, you'd listen and hear those words, and that could have a chilling effect on the decisions that you make. What kind of impact could this have on colleges and universities across the country?
Yes, well, after I was in North Carolina, I was the provost at Washington University in St. Louis, which is an excellent private university. And I think for any university, both large publics and large private universities in the U.S., international students are a source of talent that helps administer a lot of the research grants, but also as a source of revenue. And there are a lot of undergraduates from outside the country who come to the U.S. and pay for college and don't get financial aid. And there are a lot of master's students that keep solvent many of the professional schools, which can't always charge the full freight for their marquee professional programs like JDs and MBAs. So not only is this a philosophical problem, but it's also a massive financial problem if it were to spread to other universities. And I think that has to be behind a lot of the moves that they're making here.
It also must be a logistical nightmare for the folks in charge of admissions at all these different universities. If this block remains in place, we're talking about 6,000 students from Harvard alone that are either going to have to transfer to another school or simply not attend college this fall. I would imagine at this stage in the calendar year, that's almost impossible to find a new school to go to, especially one of Harvard's caliber. From a logistical standpoint, how big of a mess will this be?
Well, it would be almost impossible to get folks moved around in time for the next school year or whatever the big deadline would be. And so there are offices at universities that deal with students' visa status and things like that. They're usually understaffed. Now they're going to have a whole lot more work to do. But the bigger question is schools and the students asking themselves how many people should come from outside the United States in the fall. And again, that is going to have a talent impact, and it's going to have a financial impact. And the students who might be considering coming to the U.S. may very well decide to go to another country to take their talent and their tuition dollars somewhere else. And that could have a huge effect.
We've also seen the Trump administration withhold federal grant money from Harvard. We've seen the administration attempt to block foreign students from attempting Harvard. What do you worry could be the next weapon the White House may use in this effort that they have to try and at least have some level of control over higher education?
Yeah, well, I think what they're doing is just try keep throwing different things at these institutions to get them overwhelmed. And just as you said, you know, part of the thing that is really ironic about this is that this is an administration that says they want less bureaucratic red tape, but they keep burying these universities in more requests for information and more legal things they have to go through and more logistical things that they have to carry out. So they're actually using the very red tape that they supposedly hate as a weapon to overwhelm these institutions. And so I think they'll keep doing that, particularly because most of these things get stayed or delayed somehow in court, because frankly, most of them probably are not legal. And so I think they'll just continue to throw these things at the institutions by every different interaction that the federal government has. So financial aid is the big one that's looming now. Will Pell Grants be administered properly and other federal loans? And will there be more bureaucratic tasks associated with doing that at the very time that the universities can't afford to hire more people to do all this stuff?
And you're right. Even if they win these lawsuits, if you're a student that's trying to decide where you're going to go to school in the fall, you may not have the opportunity to wait for that legal process to play itself out, and the damage could be long term. All right. Former Chancellor Holden Thorp, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan. Great to be with you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.